Coming up, historical trauma, how the past is never really over.
I get overwhelmed with sadness and sorrow when I come over here.
The ghost village of Tanacross, its haunting legacies.
Each generation gets permeated with that fear.
I'm mad because my spirit remembers what happened to my ancestors.
The rediscovery of language and culture, how it heals.
Part of our spirituality as a native people. We came from the land.
Ahead, making peace with the past at Tanacross.
Sponsorship for Frontiers with Rhonda McBride is provided by your local Alaska Toyota dealers. Toyota, let's go places. Alaska, where there are old triumphs, but also new frontiers, with challenges as great as the state itself, but a belief that the best is yet to come, bringing you the faces, the places, and the spirit of the last frontier. This is Frontiers with Rhonda McBride.
Welcome to Frontiers. This is part 2 of our series of programs on the Rural Providers Conference, a grassroots sobriety movement which moves to a new community every 2 years. Tanacross stepped up to host this year's gathering. It's an Athabascan community 12 miles northwest of Tok on the south bank of the Tanana River. Tanacross used to be on the other side of this river. After floods tainted the water supply in the 1970s, the community moved here. Tanacross is a patriotic place. You'll see a lot of flags, great care taken with memorials at the cemetery. Maybe because of the community's role in World War II. This airstrip was an important staging area for troops and supplies. That and access to the road system changed life forever. There are some who do their best to carry on Tanacross traditions and hope they catch fire with the younger generation.
Here's the moose head soup. There's tongue, nose, the chin, the insides of the whole head. It's just wild. It's off the land, you know.
These kettles of stew will feed the guests at the Rural Providers Conference. For now, Jerry Isaac and his cousin Mildred take a break from butchering moose. It's rare to hear a conversation in the Tanacross language. There aren't many who are fluent, like Mildred and Jerry. Jerry joked about the tea made with water from a mountain spring.
The mountain water tea was so good that I got replenished, reinvigorated.
Tea to give him energy, to impress the women.
What's so funny about that? Dancing like a spruce hen, you know?
The joke, though, gets lost in translation. The first of many things to go when you lose a language.
Yikai, sent. And they can't write it.
The word for morning star, his great-grandfather's name.
The missionaries, they can't write it, so they use the Bible names.
Which explains the Isaac surname, and why in Tanacross you have the missionaries to thank for so many first names used as last names, the Thomases, the Jonathans, and the Pauls.
Heart, heart, heart.
Mildred doesn't miss life in the old village so much.
Packing water, packing wood, washing clothes.
The load grew as elders stopped sharing their heritage.
Because they were afraid of the Gihi's misery that's going to come upon them if they did.
Gihi's?
Yeah. Gihi is a priest.
The missionaries may have had good intentions, but their insistence that people give up their language and culture stoked the flames of future trauma.
They were put to fear and intimidation.
Jerry Isaac believes early missionaries used religion to bully his ancestors.
That little puppy there, it's a thinking, living, breathing being. He's got a spirit. I have spirit too.
Jerry says that the spirit of language and culture had the missionaries work to keep it alive might have made a difference.
Had they done that, you wouldn't have the amount of alcoholism, drug abuse, and any kind of self-abuses.
Jerry Isaac takes us across the river to the old village where he grew up. A short journey to a place that seems so far away, across the water and across time. It's a place that will always be home, yet always haunted.
I get overwhelmed with sadness and sorrow when I come over here.
Jerry stops to make a prayer in his language, out of respect for his ancestors.
I told them that we have visitors here. We're here to just show them the village.
After the floods, a grass fire destroyed most of the buildings.
A combination of factors that led to the move. And what we didn't do was we didn't prepare spiritually.
Jerry says there should have been a ceremony to tell his ancestors about the move, a tradition that might have also brought closure to the living.
Call the names of all your family and tell them, let's go, we're moving to this other place. So that you don't have restless spirit there. We didn't do that.
But even before the move, there were signs the modern world had encroached. Yet not all of the changes were bad. Here's a photo of Jerry's dad, Oscar, standing in front of his new car. The missionaries also taught people to garden. The kids tended them and were kept busy all the time.
This was a fish rack. There's a steam bath over there.
Everyone also hunted, trapped, and fished without interference from the government. But that changed after the move.
Just be careful.
The church survived both floods and fire, and for the most part still looks as if a service could be held here today. Although the church bell is gone, the emotions still reverberate.
You can feel presence. Can't see it, you just feel it.
Jerry still grieves for the days before the missionaries misunderstood and sometimes condemned the spirituality of his ancestors.
Years ago, when I came here, I'd feel really overwhelmed with loneliness and, I don't know, it's just sadness. And right now, it's just peaceful.
Like so many others who made the journey, it wasn't an easy crossing. It took time for the past to make peace with the present. The shot signal it's time to eat.
It took me 3 hours to do the fry bread.
A feast for the guests and enough to feed the whole community. Maybe they don't roll out a red carpet. But you won't go hungry.
Ready?
The moosehead stew has arrived just in time. The celebration inside is already underway. Some of the old Tanacross
Amen.
served up with the new.
See, we have ham here.
Where's the love in it? It's right here. It's right in front of you. Moosehead soup.
More than a meal, but food for the soul and food for the future. Up next, how to transcend historical trauma.
There are so many more things to this life than just this moment. There's so much more.
You tell those young people, you see this place, this is where your ancestors were born and raised.
John and Teresa Pingayak, their belief in the power of love, culture, and forgiveness. It was William Faulkner who said the past is not dead, it's not even past. That was long before the term historical trauma was coined, a concept Alaska Natives like John and Teresa Pingayak say explains a lot. They're from Chevak, a Chupik-speaking community on the western Alaska tundra, about 15 miles east of the Bering Sea. Almost every year, they travel to the Rural Providers Conference to share their story.
Trauma, when we go through hardship, when we go through tears that cannot cease,
John Pingayak and his wife Teresa are leaders in a grassroots sobriety movement, now more than 3 decades old.
We went through hardship. We're still going through it now, today. But we're stronger than ever before.
We're still growing together. It doesn't stop. There are so many more things to this life than just this moment. There's so much more.
For Teresa, every moment holds past, present, and future.
I did not grow up with alcohol in my family. My mom and dad were alcohol-free.
When Teresa fell in love with John, she never dreamed alcohol would be a problem in their family.
When I married John, there was alcohol, and I was 22 years old, and I was afraid of it.
But Teresa eventually helped John find sobriety.
You do without alcohol, and you'll never wonder again where that day went. What did I do? You'll never have to go through that again.
It wasn't until they had children that John finally changed.
When he first took our first child into his arms, he said, he made a vow. He said that this child, our children will never go through what he went through, and they're going to live in an alcohol-free home. And he kept his vow.
John and Teresa are also devout Christians, their faith a pillar of their family life. But John still struggles to reconcile his native spirituality with Christianity.
We were not allowed to speak our language. Part of us in our body was taken away. That's our soul. And those people that first came, the missionaries, that's what they did. They took it away.
John believes this conflict was at the root of his addiction.
Native spirituality is within me, and how I relate to my Creator.
Early missionaries banned native dancing, a practice they associated with dark spirits. But John's grandfather, the late Joe Friday, told him the songs were a gift from the Creator.
He said, the wind comes to you. When the wind blows against the trees, he'll bring you a song. It's not your creation. You did not compose it. It was given to you. So when I sing it, it's already spiritual. The Creator gave it to you, and you gave it to the people.
But 5 years ago, John felt pressure from members of his own Christian community, which included Alaska Natives, to put down his drum.
Religion did something to our belief that dancing was not good. Even some of our own brothers and sisters said, you have to completely get out of that. That's not good.
When John and Teresa went to the lower 48 to study for the ministry, one of their teachers put their minds at ease.
And she said to John, went up to him and said, where is your drum? And she said, what your grandfather taught you is good. And so he went back to his drumming and his singing.
It's never easy to walk in two worlds, even at home in Chevak. John built this sod house in the middle of a baseball field that no one used. He used it to teach kids about their culture. But shortly after this footage was taken, the house was torn down after some community and school district leaders decided it was a hazard. The artifacts inside were taken to the dump.
My family cried. It was a heartbreaking experience for all of us. I was in the dumps for quite a while, for a long time. Nobody knows about it, only God.
Are you going to build another one?
I am. It's not going to be in the middle of ball field.
You know, they destroyed that kayak, but you know they will never destroy all that in you.
The loss of the Sod House taught John a powerful lesson, drawn from both his native heritage and Christianity.
I have to forgive in order to proceed.
Proceed.
Forgive them. I forgive those men that destroyed my kayak. Let's all stand up and pursue.
John's message, sobriety is always a work in progress.
You know who it relies on. It relies on you. That's what you call resilience.
Where one must sometimes look backwards to move forward.
Our people are going to be strong, they're going to be healthy, our children are going to succeed.
Well, between them, John and Teresa Pingayak have 9 kids. Yes, 9 kids, all of them girls. And in case they look familiar to them or to you, you may have seen them in The Big Miracle, the movie starring Drew Barrymore about the whale rescue that was in what was then called Barrow. Well, up next, Doug Modig joins us with some final thoughts on how to heal old wounds. A Native American proverb about trauma. Healing doesn't mean the damage never existed. It means the damage no longer controls your life. Well, joining us to talk about that and the Rural Providers Conference and its efforts to address historical trauma, Doug Modig, one of the organizers of the conference. Now, Rural CAP is the organization that sponsors it, but they pretty much stay out of the organizing of the event. So who are the people that sort of put this conference together and plan it out?
Well, you know, people like John and Teresa, you know, they're what they learned to be called stakeholders. And it's actually a staff that represents the stand that we have taken to address alcohol and drug abuse.
So it's a symbol.
And all the effects. Yes, yeah, it's a symbol.
And what does it mean?
It means that you know, recovery begins with us personally, and we've taken a personal responsibility for recovery on behalf of our people.
So you sort of stake your grounds.
Sort of, yes, yes.
Well,
actually built on a real story that takes a long time to tell.
Well, many of these stories take a long time, but I'm glad to just kind of bring a few of them forward. You know, what does Tanacross bring to the conference in your mind?
Well, you know, it represents a cultural resiliency, and resiliency is what sort of trumps trauma. You know, Dr. Linda Chamberlain talks about that when she talks about, you know, historical trauma and what we're trying to do to help heal it.
Well, these photographs that we have from Old Tanacross kind of give you insight into the big changes that people went through. Now, this is the community in the wintertime, and the elders say that it got to 72 below sometimes. I mean, those were hard winters, a hard life.
Well, you know, from a modern perspective, you'd think, well, gee, that's really, really cold, right? But actually, the people had lived as one with the environment based upon their cultural resiliency.
So what is it about, you know, a place like that that has such a hold on people?
It gave them life. It gave them a future.
And, you know, one of the things that Jerry Isaac talked about, though, was sort of this deep hurt over, you know, having the missionaries impose things. Do you think that resonates with a lot of Alaska Natives?
When we were separated from those things that helped us heal on a regular basis, yes, it did. Because it was replaced with an empty shell of a belief system that actually didn't serve us, didn't help us.
Didn't fit with the land and the lifestyle necessarily.
Right, that's exactly it.
But yet natives embraced some of those changes.
They did, because they came out of a real tragic time. You know, the diseases, the catastrophes that happened, you know, in the beginning of the last century. that they were so overwhelming that when the people that supposedly were there to help us, said, well, you have to give up, it's time to give up your old ways because your old ways aren't helping you. And actually, they weren't allowed to readjust to the modern world.
It just happened so fast. I mean, look there, a 4th of July celebration.
Right.
So things came fast.
They did, yep.
Well, one of the things that you see at the conference is just a lot of storytelling. People telling stories. That seems so simple. I mean,
it's what our elders told us. It says that our story, our culture, you need to allow people to tell their stories. And in telling their stories, they will tell you what they need in order to heal.
Do you think that this acknowledgement of historical trauma is important at this time? Because it seems like it's been a long time in coming.
Well, it helps us to explain. It helps us understand. It helps explain what happened and how it happened. And when you can look at the source, when you can address the source, then healing is possible. But it comes from your story, and everybody has a different story.
Well, we saw with John and Teresa Pingayak that there is this tug of war between the Western world and native spirituality.
Ultimately, there is, because they sort of rest for authority over the people. They want their souls, and if they were to, stack up a bunch of souls, then they're sort of winning. On the other hand, the cost is that how do you teach people how to live successfully in the modern world? And some of the issues that we address today cannot be responded to by a simple belief system. We need to walk the spiritual path on practical feet.
Well, one of the things we saw in John and Teresa's story is that sometimes, some of the struggles come not from the Western world, but from within the Native community.
Well, ultimately, they came to believe that Christianity or a different way of living is going to help them. But that's kind of like saying that television is the answer, or that a university education is the answer. But if you're living in a community, in a village, the real issue is how do you live with the people that you're there with? And it doesn't matter how much money you have or what kind of education you have. If you can't get along with the people you're living with, doesn't make any sense.
And that's kind of where tradition comes in and being able to keep your culture. Well, if you want to know more about the conference for next year, you can go to Rural Cap's website and they'll be posting information on that. Well, for now, we leave you with a song from John Pingayak, an ancient song about the power of miracles. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.